Good morning to the channel, guys. All right, so there's a nice big event happening pretty soon in the States, and it's called the Wingman Challenge. And I've got a few friends taking part in the race, and I really wish them the best. It's one of those kinds of experiences. Not that I've done the Wingman, but I've done quite a few Icarus races, and I can tell you that the camaraderie and the event itself is those kinds of events is what makes life worth living. So I wish you guys the best, and yeah, I'm doing what I can from this side to assist some of the pilots in preparing their gear. Like I said, I've got a few friends that's gonna be there. We're also going to have a pilot called Zach Watkins. Shout out to Zach. He's going to be doing the Wingman Challenge on the brand new Nirvana HHP XC, which I've showed you guys in one of my previous videos. But you know, not just him, but there's quite a few different pilots that asked me how would I do it if I was to jump in my car, jump on a plane, fly to America and go take part, which I would have done. I think it's a great initiative, and my goal is definitely to get to as many of these events as possible. Unfortunately, visas and State Department and all those kinds of jazz has been a bit of a process to try and get any permission to get going. All right, so I'm going to do this video in a couple of segments and show you the evolution of where we started and where we are now, why we've moved that direction, and maybe you guys can use some of the information in preparing your gear. Some of this video is going to be, I'm going to cut and bring in more gear, show you how I put this together, how I put that together. Maybe a couple of stories in between so you guys get some idea of why we do what and how it's affected our decision making and design. Okay, so first up, now most of you guys will be using some form of fuel bladder. I know of a friend of mine that's building these 4 pilots that's doing the Wingman Challenge and the Speedrun Cup. Coincidentally, there's going to be a Speedrun Cup race at the Endless Foot Drag, so watch out for that. I think a lot of pilots are going to enjoy doing it. There is a prize that's more than $1,000 sponsored by Nirvana to try and get as many of you guys to take part. So if you're flying Nirvana, you're flying a Parajet, you're flying Air Conception, you're more than welcome. Come out there, test your skill, test your equipment, see how you stack up in a real world scenario of you know, cross-country flying as fast as you can scenario. But at the same time, or reasonably in the same period of time, there's going to be the Wingman Challenge. A lot of pilots are going to be going to that, and you know, the same advice goes to both, I guess. But obviously, doing a Wingman Challenge, 1,200 miles or something like that, self-sustainable means different gear design or doing it a bit differently, stacking up more gear. All right, so most of you guys are going to be using fuel bladders. This is my fuel bladder design for the new F200, but it's very similar to what you guys are going to be using regardless of what system you currently have. Now, what's very, very important about the fuel bladder design is that you're going to make the cap airtight. So it's got to have a rubber seal if you can, and I've got a fuel line that runs into the fuel bladder, and I've got a fuel filter right at the end. All right, so Nirvana actually sells these fuel filters. It's part of the system. The same fuel filter goes into the fuel tank. The reason why that's so important is because of the crap fuel that we have in this country. And if you look very carefully through the light there, you can see the crap that's in our fuel. You know, there's a little chunk over there of some form of material, and that's what that filter is for. So there's no point in flying a fuel bladder unless you're filtering the fuel, because you most likely will, unless both your fuel bladder and your main fuel tank is connected to some form of filter, inline filter system, which I don't appreciate. I don't like inline filter systems. I think that they mess up your priming and the startup procedure. Okay, so this has been an evolution for me on how you determine how much oil you're going to be flying. You obviously have to calculate your fuel consumption. And for me, you know, the first two Icaruses I did it on a Nirvana Instinct. It was a pretty heavy machine. We're looking at around 33 to 35 kilos, including a reserve chute. That's heavy. It's really heavy. And I'm a 190-pound guy, so I'm not that big. And the more weight you stack up, no matter how big you are, the bigger your problems become in trying to control that weight on the ground. So for me, the ultimate goal and lessons learned in those races was really to push for lightweight machines to get into the mix and produce more power at the same time. So the power to weight ratio improves. Okay, so my point that I'm trying to make is that I'll be carrying, if I had to do the race today, I'd be carrying a lot less fuel than I did on the Icarus. On the Icarus, I stacked up 24 liters of fuel in a hard tank, Nirvana reserve tank that was chest mounted. Had 14 liters in there, and I had 14 liters in the main tank. It's 28 liters of fuel. Now, why use a lot of fuel? On those races, here in South Africa, we have a few extremely good pilots, extremely good pilots. If you look at the results of previous Icarus races, you'll realize how short their flight legs were. They might have really great skill in getting off the ground and doing landings and acrobatics and whatever else, but cross country is really part of the sport here in South Africa. It's ingrained in paramotoring here in South Africa, fixed wing, gyro, everything, cross country, because we have such a beautiful country. I got so much to see. So it all started in how far are you going to fly? 4.5 hour legs. All right, then I'm going to have to fly 5 hours if I want to beat you. And then, then I'm going to have to do 5.5 hours. And then I'm going to do, and eventually we got to the main race leading contenders to being capable of doing 7-hour flight legs. Now, doing 7 hours on a Nirvana Instinct that burns, the heavier you become, the higher RPM you'll be running, and the more fuel you'll be burning. So my average fuel burn on the Nirvana Instinct was around 5.5 liters on the 230. That was a high fuel burn, and it only gave me, it didn't give me the race lead as far as range went, and so I had to change my route. I was actually 3rd or 4th in range that I could achieve on the full payload weight. Now, I was talking to David Barnicow, that's one of the pilots going to be flying the Wingman Challenge. I weighed 397 pounds for takeoff, 175 kilos. For a 190-pound guy, think about it, 190 pounds of my body weight, I weighed 397 pounds for takeoff because of the fuel, the gear, the oil, the water, the food, everything that piles up. That all adds up to a tremendous amount. So my point being is that if you go lightweight and you go better fuel consumption, then you could reduce the amount of fuel that you pack in, but that also has a knock-on effect in how much oil you carry. So the less fuel you burn, the less oil you need to carry with you. And so everything improves weight-wise. And I think you just got to decide what is your ideal flight distances. There was a reason why we had to, that first leg of the Icarus, the main Icarus, was if we had where we took off and get to the border, that was possible to do it in one flight. I didn't want to gamble that. I didn't have the range. I would have just been landing on fumes, so I didn't do that routing, and that cost me third or fourth position in crossing over to the border, behind guys on Air Conception 280s and whatever else. So, to give you an example, Air Conception has probably got the best on the Tornado 280s. Probably got the best power to weight ratio on the market. It's a 280cc engine, puts out a ton of power, ton of horsepower, but it's also displacement. And I was explaining this in the Paramotor group the other day. Nothing happens by black magic. Pure combustion is pure combustion. You want to get more horsepower out of it, you got to shorten the rod. You got to increase compression, and increasing compression increases heat. That's why a 185 motor, if you do something like the Icarus on it, you've got to be very careful on the settings in the carburetor, because you're going to be running higher RPMs and experiencing more heat. So you got to make sure that you got good airflow over the engine. And try and trim it down to fly slow so you're not running too high RPMs. However, now with all that weight that you're packing on, you're most likely going to be running higher RPMs than you normally would. So in my case, in the Air Conception's case, that's a really good system in the sense that it had bigger displacement. All right, but that also means getting easier off the ground with heavier payloads, but that means higher fuel burn automatically. You'll be running lower RPMs because it's a bigger displacement engine, but it still has, regardless, that there's no fuel efficient mode to a 280cc engine. It's just not possible. It's just a pure displacement engine without the computer. So I believe the race pilot that was flying with an Air Conception 280 Tornado, he was 50 liters of fuel for takeoff. 50 liters of fuel. Just let that sink in for a second. How much weight that is? That's right, 40 kilos of just pure weight that you're going to be carrying besides your machine and everything else. Just 40 kilos of weight on the fuel, and that's tremendous. It's something I wouldn't want to experience. So I had about 18 kilos worth of fuel weight, and that was too much for me anyway. It was too much. So on the new Nirvana setup, it's only going to be around 16 liters that I'll be packing. And I will be reducing flight lengths. I don't really think I need to do. I can, if I pull back the trimmers on these new wings, I can do 9 hours or 500 kilometers. That's a shit ton. That's 9 hours. But I would like to find a compromise between speed and flying in the best weather, covering as much distance as possible in the best part of the day. That means less heat in the day, thermals, whatever else. So flying faster is not necessarily a disadvantage. You're burning more fuel, but you're covering more ground in at a better time of the day. All right, so here's my system on. I'm going to be packing for if I had to do it right now. I have a 16 liter total capacity. This is a 6 liter fuel bag. This is a holster that you could probably make out of any material. I got this from Solomon because I do cross country running as well. And I've got my oil is stacked in one of these. Now obviously I can put more of one of these in this pouch, and I could probably get around 1400 milliliters of oil in this prepared. You'll notice that I use these little connectors, these racing connectors, because they're quite nice when it comes to reducing spillage. The one thing about flying oil is that it is messy as hell. You always need to have some toilet paper or wet wipes. That's one of the items that you got to carry, is wet wipes. So this is really great. I've made some markings on it, and the markings are only really functional. You know, it's already peeling off, but gives me about 550 there. It's about 650 total here, so gives me about 1300. All right, so as mentioned, oil indications, measurements indicated on the side. I think you guys can do your own kind of system here. Mine obviously didn't work. I painted it on and it's already failed. This is a key. This is the opposite end of this. So when I put oil inside my reserve bag, this is a pretty clean system. It'll never leak oil, but as soon as I put that, that's activated, then it'll start leaking oil. So I put that inside where I know it's not going to be causing any problems. And on 6 liters of fuel, I will be putting in 120 mils of oil. Pull it out, see what the measurement says. Takes about a second for it to breathe. Anyway, all right, I remove the key, and I can just put that back into its little bag. Just dry it off. That's about the cleanest system I could come up with. Make sure there's no leaking. Then that's your oil right over there, and just gas up. It's about the cleanest system I can come up with. Nice and tight. Not gonna leak. That's it. All right. Okay, next step. We've now just basically secure your oil, put it back into its put your key back in, and Bob's your uncle. All right, so that concludes that part of the refueling on your bladder side. What kind of tools I showed you with that. So let's move on to putting it on the machine. Just preparing. This is the bag in its small configuration, and now opening it up, extending it to its bigger configuration. There it opens up, becomes a nice big bag. And like I said in some of the previous videos, this should give you up to 8 liters. Now obviously there's a lot of air in here. Just want to bleed that air out. Don't need any air in the fuel. Yep. So there's plenty of space here. It's connected, and closing it up. It's not perfectly packed, but you get the idea. All right, so now this obviously is your primer bulb. You need a primer bulb to get that done. Take it across and I plug it into same connector, just giving you guys a bullseye view on this. All right, see, there it goes. What's very important about this setup is that this is always facing downwards. What happens is I'm going to start priming that. Takes about a second to prime. There we go. And it's loaded. There we go. Not a problem at all. All right, I'm just going to fill up the main tank as well. Then I'm going to get over to the main gear and start showing you some of those items. I'm waiting for it to get as hot as possible. It's hovering around 24 degrees right now, so I'm sweating a little bit. But if it gets a little bit hotter, I'm going to show you guys that takeoff on an 18 warp 2 with full Icarus payload. So let's keep on going with setting up the gear. Guys, all right, so getting to the bag. This is my design. I've got this. It's actually two Nirvana reserve fuel containers that's been adapted for an Icarus or a cross-country race. So basically two that's been stitched together, and it's got hook-in points that are selectable. So what I wanted to show you guys, I'm going to get back to this point, so more about that in a minute. It's kind of important, but I got to have this completely filled up for it to make any sense. All right, so some of the items that you're going to need is, we're going to start with the tent. This is a nice little tent, 800 grams. I do like the gin a lot more. The gin is a bit bigger to pack, so it depends on how much volume you have. I don't have it in the right container now, so I'm not going to be using it for the illustration. Now the first part of my bag has got a hard container, and it's because I like having a squashable zone, if I can put it that way. I compress everything into this area. That makes sense to me. So all right, so I've got the tent in there. Now mandatory gear is to have an inflatable mattress. This is a very, very small one. In the Icarus they will tell you that you do need to be separated from the surface, you know, I don't know, something about freezing temperatures or something. All right, so medical kit. What's really important in a medical kit, I've got just the basics. I can do a tourniquet, but I wouldn't really need to pack all of this stuff. The most important item that is required in a medical kit is an elastic band, elastic stretch tape. So any military guy that's had some form of training will tell you that if you need to stop bleeding, you need to put pressure on a wound, and this is the way you do it best. So you can close up cuts. You don't need to have band-aids. You can just use this. You can use some of the softer material gauze to clean up a wound and secure that. Then I've got a toothbrush kit because a couple of days, you're most likely going to stink. So brush your teeth. The medication that I use, some of the biggest complaints coming from these cross-country trips would be, you know, accessing water through a filtration or through water filtration tablets. Problem comes in that your stomach's still going to get upset. So the weakest link in your whole race is going to ruin it for you. Your gear pretty much needs to be perfect for you to have a really good, enjoyable experience. And having a broken down stomach is not gonna do that. So in this case, I use medication that I know will fix the stomach, not stop the running of my stomach, but actually fix it. So look out for a drug that can do that for you. And I use sleeping tablets as well. I'm not a sleeping tablet guy, but some of the biggest complaints in the Icarus is the guys look really tired when they finish. Oh, you know, I just couldn't get any sleep, and the tent was uncomfortable, whatever else. You pop a pill, you put some earplugs in your ears, and you sleep. This is part of my clothing gear. This is in the way now, but I've got these little pockets, and I got my earplugs here, and I've got ointment, you know, like a Vaseline or something like that you could, you know, keep lubricating your lips from sunburn when you're flying 10 hours a day or something like that. All right, so you don't have to use all of this as long as you got that elastic band in it and some medication. That'll do just fine. All right, getting to the food part of things. I'll tell you one thing, that the biggest element of all of your kit that will have the biggest impact on your experience is if you're going to do 10 hours of flying a day, is having a hot meal that night. My solution for that, and I had this on the Icarus, and I can tell you, oh man, it was by far the best thing I ever did, was to have access to this. This is a camping meal that you can boil in water. So I've got a little pot set, but I'm not packing a stove or anything like that. I just put water, put this in it, make a little fire, and I boil this meal. This is beef curry and butter beans. Man, I tell you, it's gonna be the best meal of your freaking life. It could say shit on this and it's still going to be the best meal of your life if you get a hot meal in when it's a day like that. So I got two here for a typical adventure, because it's only the dinners. So it's a 2-day flight, for example. It's 2 dinners. I've got some other food items in there as well. But what's important here would be other supplements, and this, I use the GOO range. The GOO uses amino acids, not caffeine based, so you don't have a drop in energy. This has got like 1,400 amino acid shot right here, and you can put this in one of your pants pockets or something like that when you're going to be flying. You can take this while you're flying. It's going to lift you, give you a lift up. What I use for breakfast is the GOO protein shake. This has got 5,500 amino acids. All ultra racing guys really want to use this as a recovery drink, but if you drink this in the morning before you fly, you're not going to be hungry. You're not going to want to eat meal. Unless you want to eat with your hands, which is dirty. Knife and fork kit, very tiny one that I use. And that's been a really big success for me. Those shakes, I would have more than one of them because it's a couple of mornings, most likely if you're going to go on an adventure. I think my daughter is really into this stuff, so I think she stole a couple of my shakes out of this kit. But this goes everywhere with me. I just came back from Botswana. I had no phone reception there, and you could get into a place where you don't know where you're going to get your next meal from. So this travels in my bag wherever I go. Keep it frozen, and I just access that. So lighter kit, so propane lighter. Don't use a normal lighter because you might not get it going in wind, but this thing will always fire up. It's a cheap, inexpensive way to get a fire going because you don't want to be Bear Grylls in the bush when you're tired and you've been flying for 10 hours. Just no point. All right. The last item that's going into the compressible zone is the sleeping bag. Now this is a Sub-Zero, but you don't really need it because I've never really had to use it to that extent, because you got layered clothing and you're going to sleep with your clothes on. Most likely, you're just going to cram into your tent and you're going to go to bed. And the clothes you wear is what you're going to finish with. If you want to pack in extra underwear and extra pants and suit and tie and kitchen sink, you got to take off with that shit. And that's why, to me, I had that in. I had a couple of shirts and whatever else in on the first Icarus, and what a waste of space. Absolute waste of time and space. So whatever you wear should be in such a way that it's not going to show that it's dirty, number one. Number two, it's flexible, it's usable for any kind of conditions, and it's layered. So we'll get to the clothing in a second. So putting in a sleeping bag, compressing that into the hard container, and closing up. I can actually put some more stuff in here. I'm going to put, this is the bowls that I use. You can do more than one meal because you can pull this out after you've cooked the meal. You can put your meal in there and you can use it for cooking something else, for hot water, for coffee or whatever. This is the cup, it just collapses back and forth. I don't have to tell you Americans this, you guys got better gear than we do. So buy whatever brand is the smallest and doesn't come from China. Everything comes from China, but let's hope that doesn't. We've got an option there. Nirvana does not come from China. Okay, food wise, I did explain the whole food thing. I'm just putting that into the front container. Now, all right, light, propane, small towel. That's it. I'm done for now. Done for now here. Oh yeah, one multi-tool. You can have some extra, a little bit of tools and things that go with, like zip ties and duct tape, 2 essential parts. I don't have that here with me now. I would have for the race. Leatherman goes into the bag. It's got so much space left here. It's going to be shaking all over the place. But this is what I wanted to show you guys. I'll put the oil in here as well with its key, just to fill up the space. Most likely I will be doing that differently. Let me tell you guys a story on the oil. Oil was a problem for me on the first Icarus. Had 2.5 liters of oil in a bladder. Had my bag, everything ready to go. Day before, and we're doing test flights, and the bag of oil ruptured. boom, all over my bag. My tent, some of my clothing, my sleeping bag, soaked in oil. Still got an oil stain on it, I think. And fortunately, its motor doesn't smell that bad. But what it taught me was, A, I could have been out of the race because I would have been out of oil somewhere else if that happened in the field. And B, that ruins all your other clothing. So I've got an oil container on the outside of my bag that I can put in here. I'll slot it in there. But I showed you guys what my oil container looks like, that tube. So put your oil in different tubes instead of just one catheter bag. I use a catheter bag in some races like the Icarus X, but you're going to be a couple of days, chances of something happens. That is a better system than a catheter bag that's got a valve in it. If you can not put all your eggs in one basket, I guess it helps. All right. That's it. All right, some of the other items I'm not. All right, so on the Icarus you get one of these. It's a Garmin InReach. They have other systems as well. There are other makes and brands of this. It's a really good little satellite communicator. It links up with your phone. You got your maps. You can fly with that. You can communicate, send messages out, and it's got an SOS button. So if you are operating alone, this is a really good way of doing that. If you've got a buddy on an InReach as well, you can communicate with him, and you can see each other. You can track each other as well. So this one has already got its Velcro on it. I will just secure it like that for a second. It's not going to go anywhere. But yeah, that's a really good tool to be able to use and access. Now, clothing. Getting back to the whole clothing thing, that you don't want to pack in extra shirts and pants. This is an Emerson combat pants. I use black because it doesn't show it when it's full of dirt and whatever else. You can just dust it off and it's fine. Whereas I did the Icarus in the khaki pants, and that was a big mistake because the time I got that, it was not khaki anymore. It was red and didn't look too good. But this is actually something I would be preferable. Got a lot of pockets. I use a lot of items I stow on me and not inside my main bag. And it gets to your clothing leather, your layering of your clothes as well is really important. So having a shirt that's stretchable, that's of a good color, that is not going to show too much dirt, like something like different brands make them, but it's really good to have one set of clothing that you can layer. You don't have to swap out. Now, early morning, it's going to be zero, sub-zero, whatever the temperatures are, especially high altitude flying that you're doing. Your first layer, you want a goose feather insulated jacket that you could take off at any time. But you're starting off in very cold temperatures, but you're landing in midday and it's 15-20 degrees, you want to take off again. One of the most demoralizing events that can happen to you is the fact that you're hot because you got to keep your clothes on you, where you're going to put it. And that just sucks. It's one of the most frustrating things that can happen to you. So this is not windproof, but if I'm going to take off in 0 degrees in the mornings, I use a windproof jacket made by Nirvana. It's very thin, it's not warm at all, but it stops the wind 100%. So close it up like this. Mike's going to be busted up here. But all right, so this is what I will take off with. When I get to the first 5 hour, finish the 5 hour leg, I just take off the goose feather layer. Sweaty already, I can't get it off. And then put this one back on, and I'm good to go for the warmer part of the day and not have a problem with the temperature. All right, guys. So clothing, when that goose feather folds up, that's kind of important. It's going to be this small. All right, you shove it into a small little bag, and it works quite nice to just put it in anywhere. You can close it up. Now that this is nicely balanced, all right, where do you mount your camera? I've got mounted on the hard place here. I've got a swivel top, and the 360 actually goes in between the two bags, and you've got camera access and whatever else. So that's one way to do it. You can put it in the outside part as well. Don't try and fly with a stick. Where you're going to put the stick, you're going to put it into your bag. It's just, try and come up with some mount that is a compromise, and it's not going to give you, whatever you do that is not fully thought through is an issue. All right, it's going to ruin your race. Okay, guys, let's do some weight calculations here on what my all-up weight is and why I fly the Icarus, for example. The next Icarus will be flying on an 18 warp. A lot of guys say that is insane. It's way too small. The previous Icarus I did was in the Hadron XX 24. Guys, remember those gliders, but the weight has come down so dramatically with these new designs that I kind of reckon that this is good enough for me. On the radio, back end Velcro, sticks quite easily. Because there's a helicopter in the air, I'm going to have to secure this. And I've got something that just comes into place there. Make sure the radio, don't lose the radio when I'm flying. Obviously, a helmet is super important. You're going to be listening to music and other air traffic and whatever else, especially if you're doing cross-country flying. This is the Nirvana MC5. Does a great job at performing all the functions that you could possibly want from a helmet. A couple of things I missed would be the radio, the helmet, and the fact that you need a good headlamp. If you don't have the headlamp, you got an issue, because most likely it's going to get dark real soon when you get to your landing site, and you're not going to be able to see where you're going and what you're doing. The scale, there we go, 92 kilos. Why knee pads are so important when you're putting on your machine. Don't let that dig into you. Okay, fully set up. I can see the balancing is out on this, and I would have to rectify how I pack this thing, but I would add that here. It's not that heavy. That's what it looked like. Take off. I got 2 extra binders which I secure around the waist side. I can take them off during flight. See, that's already where Velcro starts failing. There we go. Now, as the wing inflates, it's going to pick this up, and I'd be able to relax it just by dropping that down and loosening these up. So I just take these binders off and I'll put it down on my lap, and I'll secure it again before I take off again. Let's see what the scale says. Let's go. I can't even see what the weight is. 132, 130, 132. It's important to remember about when you're measuring your full weight is that you've got to hold your wing as well, or know what the wing weight is. We can add that on, but yeah, it's just tight space over there, so I'll just take the machine and the Icarus weight. Alright guys, you didn't hear me yelling and screaming our phone and laughter up there. Takeoff was perfect. Landing, I had to time it correctly for the wind to be perfect. Normally, if I were to do this in the Icarus and I wouldn't have a windsock up, I'd be using a smoke grenade, or I'd just be reading my speedometer, and if the speed is good, at the right landing approach speed, then I'll commit to the landing. But perfect. I just showed you guys a 31 to 32 degrees Celsius takeoff, full payload on the walk to, a little bit of help from the wind, gotta say that, but also it was playing against me as well. You know, the landing I had to time 100% correct. So shows you it can be done, and the weight on landing. Remember, I would say the disadvantage, you guys gotta remember, I'm landing fully fueled. Got that little bit extra in the tank that I could have filled up as well. But the point is, full payload, full fuel. You should be doing the landing like this when you finish your 5-hour stretch and you got no fuel, and it's much easier to land. All right, so bonus material here. What do you do if you got to pee
at 5,000 or 10,000 feet or whatever, you're not going to just pull over and take a pee. You're not going to whip it out because you've got a big bag in front of you. So what do? This is the system I use. All right. It's a condom catheter roll-up. What do they call this? What's the proper language for this? I think they're too ashamed to actually put a name on it. But this is size large, and basically you roll this sucker on and it stays on for the entire cruise. You put a plug in, all right, so a little pipe goes in, and let me show you how this works. So that's going to go in there and it's going to go down your leg, and what I do is I actually put it through this little loop here on my pants. So what happens is it's secured on the inside. You don't want this thing to accidentally pull out. So it's barely visible. It's going to look like that. It's barely visible. But I can tell you, when you're tired and you're beat up, flying midday thermals, and you get wherever you're going, then you don't bother going to the toilet anymore. You just pee wherever you walk.